Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are in the early stages of the 2031 season. Our A's are off to an excellent start, 17-9 record, which puts us a game up on the Astros in the American League West as we sit here on May 1st. We've got three key goals with ownership this year. We are in a lame duck season. We only got a one-year extension this past off season. So we probably need to achieve at least one and hopefully two of these goals to be able to retain our jobs and hopefully get an extension. Key goal and probably the most realistic to achieve is to have a winning record this year. I think if we're able to do that, we probably do keep our job. We're also supposed to upgrade at center field this season. Right now, Luis Lara, our previous center fielder, is doing a decent job at giving us an upgrade. Not having a monster season by any measures, but he still, over the course of the first month of the season, has put up a 105 WRC plus and a 0.7 WAR. So if he continues to play that way for the next 5 months, it will be a pretty productive season, even though he does only have one stolen base through the first month of the year. And then our third goal for this season is the one that we are least likely to achieve, and that's an increase in fan interest. I guess technically we may very well achieve it. We're at 51 and we used to be at 49, but I think what Mr. Fisher is looking for is a more significant 10 plus kind of point increase in fan interest, and I think that is probably not all that realistic, but hopefully we have a winning record and hopefully we get good play out of center field this season, whether it is from Luis Lara or it is from Jake Ortega, who is our center fielder of the future and is currently in AAA for us, as he's not quite ready for the major leagues at this time. And taking a look at our schedule for this upcoming month of May, we face American League rivals throughout the month. Interestingly, only 5 games against divisional rivals, and it's all in one road trip. 3 at Seattle, 2 at Texas, before we finish off in the central part of the country with 4 against the Twins. But very important month for us in terms of ensuring that we're positioned well for a potential wild card. With only 5 games within the division, though, clearly winning against teams outside of the division is important, but we're not going to get a crack at the Astros, who are our closest rivals in the division at this point. And the start of the month of May has not been great for us. We were swept in 3 games on the road against the Yankees, and then we dropped 2 out of 3 in Chicago before thankfully coming back home to Oakland, where we did win 3 of 4 against Baltimore. But our record has now slipped to 21-15, and we are now half a game behind the Astros in the division. We're 1 game up on the final wild card spot and 2.5 games away from potentially the team that is chasing for that final wild card spot at this point in the Yankees. So certainly the fact that they just swept us helped them get back into contention pretty quickly here in the early-ish stages of this 2031 season. And we ended up taking 2 out of 3 against the Royals, so a pretty successful 5-2 homestand helps offset the 1-5 road trip to start the month. Still in second place, still half a game behind Houston. We've got those games in the division coming up on the road at Seattle and at Texas that I talked about at the top of the episode. But right now we've got a decision to make. We mentioned in the last episode that we kept Gabriel Gonzalez on an unnecessary rehab assignment in AAA because the team was going pretty well, and we wanted to train him up a little bit in center field. You can see he's not going to be particularly effective at the position, which we kind of knew going in. but it's time for us to bring him up. And with Ortega hopefully on the way in the not too distant future, Johnny DeLuca may be the guy that we move on from here. He is the second best defensive center fielder we have on the major league team right now, behind starter Luis Lara. But DeLuca's hitting a .167 this year, over 42 at-bats. Does have 2 homers and 6 ribbies, but when it all adds up, it's a 73 WRC plus, and he has been below replacement level. We signed him to a minor league contract, and I think it's time for him to I guess we'll have to have him clear waivers. I wouldn't mind it if he did clear waivers, because if Lara had a more significant injury, we might want DeLuca back for his defensive competence in center field. But for the time being, we are going to waive and DFA Mr. DeLuca, and that will allow us to bring Mr. Gonzalez back onto the major league roster. And we ended up with a good homestand. We swept Seattle, and then we split the final 2 games of the homestand against Texas. Did just lose the first game of this brief road trip. Actually, the first game of the series in Minnesota. The Texas games were on the road as well. Actually, this whole thing was a road trip. I don't know why I was calling it a homestand. I guess somehow I view playing against teams in my division as something that is like a homestand. But 4-2 on the road trip at this point, with 3 games left against Minnesota before we'll be home against Tampa Bay to finish off the month. Fortunately, Johnny DeLuca did make it through waivers. Unfortunately, he refused an assignment to AAA, and then oddly, although no one picked him up through waivers, the Texas organization was willing to trade us Jim Neff, who looks like a backup catcher type, good personality traits, a borderline competent bat, and very borderline competent defense, so certainly not a big part of our future, but better to get something back in return, plus a little bit of extra cash. Again, it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense, since Texas could have picked him up when he was on the waiver wire, and they chose not to, but I will not look a gift horse in the mouth, whatever the heck that means. And the last week plus of May went reasonably well. We took 2 of the final 3 games in Minnesota, took 2 out of 3 at home against Tampa Bay, and then we took 2 out of 3 at home against Cleveland. So as we sit here on June 1st, we are back in first place in the AL West at 33-21, a game and a half ahead of the Astros, who have lost 5 in a row, to help us get back into first. Colt Keith having a monster season, leading the AL with 18 home runs and 55 ribbies. And Jackson Ferris is leading the AL in earned run average, wins, while Chase Lee is leading the American League in saves. So things going really well. Not surprisingly, we just had 2 of the guys we just talked about, Jackson Ferris and Colt Keith, named AL pitcher and hitter of the month. Ferris 4-0 with a 1.91 ERA in the month of May, while Colt Keith hit .308 with 12 home runs and 33 ribbies during the month of May. So as we sit here on June 1st, take a look at our team statistics. Our 33-21 record is 2 above Pythagorean expectations. So a year after being pretty unlucky, we've gotten a little bit lucky this year, and you can see that most dramatically in our 12-6 record in one-run games. But we have been over 500 easily in each of the first 2 months of the season, given the good start we had last year, which was followed by this team just completely falling apart. Glad that we got out of the month of May with another winning record. Still are very mediocre in terms of our offense, ranking 10th in the 15-team American League in runs scored. The pitching, as expected, has been outstanding, though. Second in the AL in runs allowed. A little confused by this. I guess there must be some differences in the number of unearned runs or the games played, because we are first in the AL in ERA, first in starters ERA, and first in bullpen ERA, but second in runs allowed. So I guess there's a few unearned runs that have made it in there, which is a bit surprising given that we're third in defensive efficiency and seventh in zone rating. But this is a team that has definitely been aided by our pitching staff this year, which we kind of expected. But glad to see that as we sit here on June 1st, we've got a decent chance, it seems, at hitting our goal of a winning record. Lara is slowing down a bit in terms of his play in center field, and fan interest, despite our good start, has actually retracted a point since the beginning of the season to 50. I don't think that Jake Ortega is quite ready to promote. He ended up with a brief stint on the IL, so he's played just 44 games at this point. He's doing really well in AAA, a .324 average, 14 doubles, 3 triples, 9 homers, and 179 at-bats, 128 WRC+. But when we look at his batting ratings, it's not clear that he's going to be an obvious upgrade to what we have at the major league level. So given that we're doing fine without him and we're leading the division, I think we'll continue to let him hopefully get closer to reaching his true potential down in AAA. I expect we'll see him at some point this year. It's not inconceivable to me that if we bring him up in September, and if we are fortunate enough to guide this team into the playoffs, that he could end up on the playoff roster. But with us in first place without him, the fact that he's not obviously ready to dominate at the major league level makes me feel like keeping him down is the right thing to do. I do think that if Luis Lara ends up injured at some point, knock on wood, I hope I'm not jinxing things by saying that we would likely bring up Ortega to play center field every day at that point. And we've gotten the month of June off to a good start, taking the final game of the series at home against the Guardians. Mentioned recently that we only played 5 games in division in May. Going to be a very different situation in June. We've got 4 on the road in Texas against the Rangers, and then we head east to Houston for the final 3 of that road trip, and then 2 at home against the Angels, followed by 4 at home against Seattle. So the next 2 weeks are entirely matchups against our AL West foes. We've got the 2.5 game lead on Houston right now. Would certainly love to expand that over the next couple of weeks, and taking the series against the Astros will be the most direct way to ensure that that happens. And unfortunately for us in Oakland, the road trip in Texas was pretty brutal. Won the first game against Texas, won the last game at Houston, but in between we lost 5 consecutive games. So as we sit here now on June 9th, only have a 1.5 game lead on the Astros. We do have the 6-game homestand against the Mariners and the Angels, and hopefully we can win at least 4 of those 6 games as we head towards the middle part of this month of June. And unfortunately for us, the exact same thing happened on this homestand as on the road trip. Won the first game of the homestand against the Angels, won the final game of the homestand against Seattle, but in between we lost 4 games. So this month of June, not off to a great start for us. Still have a 2.5 game lead on the Astros as they've lost 5 in a row. But you can see both the A's and the Astros 3-7 in our last 10. And the Mariners and the Angels, and quite honestly, even the Rangers are not too far behind us, as we have definitely been coming back to the pack a bit over these last couple of weeks. That said, Keith still looks potentially poised to lead the league in homers and ribbies. He's also moved up to second in the league in OPS. And Jackson Ferris, although he's been stalled in 8 wins with us not playing all that well, tied for second in the league in that category. But Chase Lee is still leading the league in saves, and Ferris has actually lowered his ERA to 2.04. Despite not getting a decision over the first couple of weeks of June. And with the team reeling in the standings, we've just lost our first 2 games of a brief road trip to San Diego. Actually, both games of a brief road trip to San Diego. As expected, a guy who is hitting a $175 in the case of Gleyber Torres is complaining about his role on the team. As we take a look at things, team chemistry is still happy at this point, but we certainly have not been playing as well recently. The lead on the Astros is down to 2, and the Mariners, Angels, and Rangers are all lurking even closer, with us having lost the last 2 games since the last time we checked in. And now we've got 3 straight losses after dropping the first game of the series against Arizona, and everyone is complaining. Alex Vesia, at least asking to be the closer, has been good since we brought him on board with a 1.10 ERA, and he's got a sub-1 whip with 19 strikeouts and 16 1/3 innings. But Ryan Jeffers, our backup catcher, is hitting a $163 with 34 strikeouts in 92 at-bats, and he is asking for a larger role right now, which I can't say I completely understand, since I'm starting to think about who the options are at backup catcher that are better than Mr. Jeffers, much less giving him a bigger role. And while we're talking about a guy who strikes out a ton, we haven't checked in on our old buddy Hidero Endo this year. I haven't even checked in on him offline, so I have no clue how his season is going. So let's see what he is doing with Detroit this year. And he's got the batting average back over the Mendoza line at 216, 20 homers and 54 ribbies and 241 at-bats, striking out in a bit less than half of his at-bats. And a 108 WRC plus, which if he's able to maintain that over the rest of the season would mean this would be the best season of his career at the age of 32. So Endo is off to a solid start this year with the Tigers. And fortunately, we did salvage the last 2 games against the Diamondbacks, but as we head into the last week of the month of July, the last week of the month of June. We're heading towards the beginning of July. June has been a pretty unpleasant month for these Oakland A's. We've got 3 at the Guardians and 3 at Detroit and Hidero Endo before we finish off the month next Monday back at home against the Rockies. Hopefully we can take at least 4 of these last 7 games, even though 6 of them are on the road. We don't have more than 2 wins in any week this month, and would certainly like to change that statistic before the calendar flips to July. And unfortunately, we didn't get to go 4-3 or better over the last 7 games. Went 3-4. We lost both series on the road at Cleveland and on the road at Detroit, before coming home and finally finishing off the month of June with a win against the Rockies. But was a pretty rough month for us as we reached the 80-game mark. Taking a look at the standings, we're up only a game on the Mariners now, who have gotten past the Astros into second place. Colt Keith continues to have a monster year, leading the league in homers. Ribby's second in the league in OPS. Jackson Ferris has dipped back to second in the league in ERA, and Chase Lee is now second in the league in saves. Taking a look at our team statistics and a brutal 10-16 month of June, so we may have knocked on wood a little too soon as far as how this team was performing. You can see the record in one-run games down to 16-12. 43-37 record, still one better than expectations. 12th in the league in runs scored, so the offense continues to deteriorate, and we have also slipped back a little bit to third in the league in runs allowed, although the pitching staff and our defense are definitely not the problems. It is offensively driven, and as we head into the month of July and head closer to the trade deadline, certainly finding some players who can help our offense is probably going to be a top priority. And despite that rough month on the field for Oakland, Colt Keith is the AL hitter of the month for a second consecutive month. 326 average, 10 homers, 27 ribbies, and 23 runs scored. So as we close in on the midway point of the season, our third baseman slash first baseman probably has a good chance of getting some MVP votes if he keeps playing the way that he's playing. And more importantly, the team remains in first place here in the AL West. And hopefully we can get a above 500 record here in the month of July, which would go a long way towards ensuring that we do guide this team to a winning record and a playoff berth when all is said and done here in 2031. And we ended up splitting the first two games of the month with Colorado, but still took 2 out of 3 in that series. We've got about 3 weeks now until the All-Star break, and we've got just a week until the draft, but we'll focus on the draft likely in our next episode, although who knows. I think this episode will probably be plenty action-packed when we spend some time right now doing the midseason review of our team. Mr. Fisher has reported in on our goals, wanted us to have a winning record this year, so he's happy with the 44-38 record. Not pleased with where we are in center field. Happy that we're doing okay with attendance. Not happy with the lack of homegrown talent. Not happy with fan engagement. Not happy with the lack of improvement in extra inning games. He says he's good with our progress towards goals. Happy with our overall performance. So the narrative is not bad. But really, the only goal that we're going to achieve this year is the team record goal. And with the way we've been playing of late, certainly not a guarantee that we keep winning more games than we lose. As we sit here on the 4th of July, 2031, our 44-38 record is a game better than expectations. 12th in the league in runs scored, 3rd in the league in runs allowed. Taking a look at how our team is performing, and not surprisingly, the pitching is generally solid. Jackson Ferris, 8-2 with that 2.52 ERA, hasn't earned a win in quite some time now, and that ERA has been creeping up a bit over the past couple of weeks, but still is a 2.3 WAR on the season. Shane Baz, after a slow start, has been pitching better of late. Still a losing record at 5-7, but he's got the ERA down to just over 4 at this point. Chase Burns, another new addition, 5-3 with a sub-3 ERA for us and a 2.1 WAR here on the 4th of July. Jason DeCaro has been a bit disappointing, 7-7, 4.78 ERA, so he's actually been a bit worse than he was a year ago, only half a win above replacement when all was said and done, below average ERA plus and FIP minus on the season. And Mason Miller, who's now our number 5 starter, 4-6 with a 4.25 ERA. Does have a 1.2 WAR though. The walks have really been the issue for him this year, with 44 in just 78 and a third innings pitched. Chase Lee, a 3.86 ERA is our closer, but he does have 25 saves, so almost as many as he got in the last couple of seasons with us. Certainly this year, winning more games than we did a year ago, although we're not on pace to win quite as many as we did in 2029 at this point. Alex Vessia's performance has definitely regressed since he asked for a more prominent role. We didn't put him into the closer role, but he had been pitching so well that we did put him in the stopper role. But the ERA has increased to over 3 at this point, which is certainly not optimal. Caden Dana, a new addition this year, is a guy who could start for us, but he's been in the bullpen. 4.18 ERA over 32 and a third innings pitched. He has struck out 41 batters and has been a bit above replacement. Joe Rock, all-star a year ago, another guy who could start for us, has a 2.33 ERA over 58 innings pitched, but has given up 10 home runs, so given up long balls about twice as frequently this year as he did a year ago. Not nearly as good as he was last year. Lyon Richardson, new addition this offseason, 4.07 ERA over 42 innings pitched. Jordan Romano, sub-3 ERA over 28 and 2/3 innings for the 38-year-old veteran. Rule 5 pick Ryan Reich, a win, a loss, and a mid-4s ERA. He has certainly not been exceptional, and either has lefty Jose Hernandez, our left-handed specialist, whose ERA is over 5 at this point, although his Sierra is 2.44, so maybe take some solace in that, but his ERA plus below average, his FIP minus well below average at 144, and a minus 0.4 WAR is certainly not strong. So feel like there's definitely a few holes in this bullpen that we could look to hopefully fill over the next month or so. Wouldn't say these issues are likely to be as urgent as some that we're dealing with our everyday players, but the middle and long relievers are definitely not as strong as we might like them to be. And before we take a look at our major league hitters, we'll take a look at the top prospect in our organization, Jake Ortega. We've actually been playing him at first base recently, just to make him a little more versatile defensively, although I do think his future is as an outfielder for us, at least over the near to medium term. Still having a solid year, 318 average, 15 homers and 55 ribbies and 277 at-bats. 128 WRC plus and a 2.2 WAR. Ratings-wise, still looks like he's not necessarily going to dominate at the major league level. That being said, there's really not much left for him to prove in the PCL. Given that we're still hanging on to first place, I don't think we need to rush him up to the majors. He's going to be turning 24 in about a month and a half, and it's probably a coin flip whether we have him up before his birthday, as I talked about. If we do have some injury issues with Luis Lara, then Ortega will certainly join us sooner rather than later, but hopefully that won't happen. So I have a feeling we're going to see some more significant holes in the lineup here, other than potentially bringing up Mr. Ortega and maybe looking for an arm or two to help our bullpen. Catcher Drake Baldwin struggling to hit 200 this year as he bounces back from the injury that cost him a good chunk of last season. 70 WRC plus is definitely not what we're paying him for. He has still put up a 0.6 WAR. Excellent defensive catcher who helps our pitchers, but the hitting this year has not been good, And we talked about Ryan Jeffers not that long ago. His batting average is a .52 in 99 at-bats, only a 29 WRC plus, well below replacement level. I think upgrading at backup catcher, whether we trade for someone or just promote somebody else from AAA onto our team, is something that we will look to do in the very near term. Colt Keith, we've talked about a lot, having a monster season, his third year in Oakland, batting over 300, 29 homers, 86 ribbies, a ridiculous 172 WRC plus, and a 3.5 WAR as we sit here just past the midway point of the season. Tyler Soderstrom, not as good as he's been in previous years. The batting average down to 236, 11 homers and 38 ribbies and 246 at-bats, and he's been, at least according to WRC Plus, a slightly below average offensive player, and he's basically been a replacement level player when everything is factored in. So we're not paying a ton to Soderstrom, but he seems like he's having an off year. Ratings still suggest he's a useful bat, definitely with some home run pop against right-handed pitching, but we haven't necessarily seen it as much on the field this year. Hideki Arakawa as our everyday second baseman this year, or at least most of the time second baseman, starting against right-handed pitching, hitting 239 in 213 at-bats, but less power than a year ago, just 2 home runs and only 16 ribbies. So his WRC plus of 60 is pretty much right where he was a year ago when he had that significant regression from his first season in the major leagues. Justin LeBron, we picked up in a trade with the Yankees that brought on DeCaro last July. Also struggling with the bat, hitting just 220. But he does have 9 doubles and 4 home runs in 109 at-bats. He's driven in 11 runs, so almost as many ribbies as Arakawa, and he's basically been a league average offensive player. Certainly could consider giving LeBron a little bit of playing time at second base, perhaps over Arakawa, even against right-handed pitching, with the fact that Arakawa has just not done much with the bat this year. Thomas Saggese, 264 average, 20 doubles, 5 triples, and 8 homers and 288 at-bats. Been slightly above league average offensively, put up a WAR of 1. Honestly, was hoping for a bit more from him. Hasn't been a bad season, but can't say that it's really been a good season either. And finishing up with the infielders, Brian Rincon, what will likely be his final year with us as our shortstop. The batting average down to 213, only 3 home runs and 253 at-bats and an 83 WRC plus. Still has a 1.7 WAR, largely driven by his excellent glove at shortstop, so certainly not in any danger of losing his spot in the starting lineup. But with the lack of hitting from Rincon and Arakawa at second and short, if there happened to be a all-star caliber middle infielder available on the trade market that we could pick up, that would not be the worst thing for us to think about adding, particularly given that Rincon is fragile physically, while Arakawa is normal in terms of his injury proneness. Turning to our players listed as outfielders, although both Diane Jorge and Gleyber Torres can also play and do also play the infield. Diane Jorge, 281 average, not a lot of power with only 1 home run and 256 at-bats. Does have 17 doubles, though, and he's basically been a league average offensive player. Given his defensive versatility, that's fine. He's also stolen 13 bases. The issue is we've had to start him 72 of the first 82 games. I think in a perfect world, we'd probably prefer somebody else with a little more pop in the in the lineup against right-handed pitching. Gleyber Torres, a rough first and likely only year in Oakland, hitting a .171 in 117 at-bats, only one homer, 37 WRC plus, almost a win below replacement. Just not really working out, even though he's playing primarily against left-handed pitching where we think he should be successful. Actually, the at-bat splits are pretty even, only one more against lefties than righties. But with the number of righties we face, obviously we're encouraging him to be in the lineup against lefties, and batting just a .36 against left-handed pitching this year and barely above 200 against right-handed pitching. Luis Lara, batting average is down to 236. The WRC plus has fallen to 82, a 1.3 WAR on the season. Still thinking hard about whether it's time to replace him with Mr. Ortega. Not that I think Ortega is necessarily going to deliver much more at the major league level than Lara has, but if he does deliver more than Lara has, that may help us with ownership who wants an upgrade in center field. Chase DeLauder really has not done much offensively the last couple of months. He got off to a decent start, but now the batting average is down to 225 and just a 78 WRC plus. He has been below replacement level. At least he's healthy this year compared to where he was a year ago when he had just 81 at-bats and played just 22 games. But the offensive performance for a guy who should be an important part of our lineup has not been there. And last but not least, Gabriel Gonzalez hitting just 213 on the season, only his 61 at-bats at the major league level, given some of the injury issues he's had. So I think when we think about this outfield objectively, there's clearly a lot of areas that we can upgrade offensively. So adding a backup catcher, adding a productive bat in the outfield, and potentially adding a good infield bat as well are three things that I'd love to do. We do have some money to use by virtue of some of the trades that we've made. Take a quick look before we finish up the episode as to what the trade block looks like now. I'm guessing on July 4th it's probably not overwhelmingly interesting. You can see our guy Rincon is one of the more interesting players out there. Our old buddy Hidero Endo is out there too. Batting average 213, 107 WRC plus, so not materially different production from him than when we previously checked in. First baseman Jorge Corona, hitting 295, 9 homers, 124 WRC plus. He is in the final year of a very expensive contract. Really just a first base / DH type. The bat certainly could help us. I'm guessing the price to bring him on board may end up being a bit more challenging for us to justify. But there's obviously a big crew of everyday players who are potentially available on the trade market. Brian Rocchio, competent defensively with a bat that doesn't look awful. He's in the final year of a contract. He could be a guy who is a switch hitter in particular, might be able to help our offense a little bit. Not sure how much the cost is going to be for him. I'm guessing it's probably not going to be cheap to bring him on board. Yeah, I mean, they're looking for a pretty important major league player or one of the top prospects in our organization to let go of him. So that might be a little tricky for us to pull off. Taking a look at the pitchers right now who are on the trading block. Orion Kerkering, from just a quick look, looking at his stuff, movement, and control. Trevor McGill, probably the two most interesting. A couple of right-handers. Kerkering making only $4 million. Certainly would be a bullpen arm that could help us. Just wondering how high the price for him is going to be. This is probably one that we'll be able to do. It seems like there's a lot of different directions we could go. So may look to bring Orion Kerkering on board over the near term to give us a little bit more of a proven arm in the bullpen. Not that the bullpen is our biggest problem, but there's definitely ways to upgrade there. Trevor McGill, another righty with outstanding stuff, having a respectable year. He's making more money at the age of 37, also wants to be a closer. I'm guessing he's going to be available for a pretty reasonable price given the money that he's making. Yeah, you can see there's a lot of options we have to bring him on board, although the price for McGill actually looks a bit higher than the price to potentially bring Kerkering on board. So as we sit here on July 4th, we've definitely got a lot to think about with this team. I'm actually going to scout up a lot of the guys that we just talked about. We didn't have very high scouting accuracy on many of them, particularly some of the position players. So not going to jump at anything immediately, but think that there should be some opportunities for us to improve this team over the next 3.5 weeks. And with the way we've been playing of late, we have to take advantage of those opportunities when we find them. And with just a week to go until the 2031 draft, and the fact that we're waiting on some scouting reports on some of the guys that we might have traded for, I think it probably makes sense to sim ahead to the start of the draft and see who's available at number 10 for us, and open things up to the worldwide scouting department for anyone who's willing to share their thoughts with us. And we've had a decent week since we last checked in. It took 2 out of 3 at home against Minnesota. Won the final 2 games of the homestand against Seattle before losing yesterday to Kansas City as we start a long road trip that will take us up through the All-Star break. So 48-40 record here, 88 games into the season. We're up 2.5 on the Mariners and 4 on the Astros. Unfortunately, at this point, it looks like it's very possible that the AL West is only going to have one playoff team this year. So as much as we'd like to hope that we'd be in competition for a wild card, it's certainly conceivable that if we don't hold on to win the division, it could be another season without playoffs here in Oakland. And it looks like there's actually a pretty deep draft class this year, so I think we're going to get a guy that we really like at pick number 10. For those of you who have been following us closely over the years, you'll know that there's a player we thought about 3 years ago who's back in the draft this year. And when we look at the OSA mock draft, doesn't seem like we're likely to get him. Chris Patterson is a guy who we thought about a few years ago. You may remember Cowboy Patterson. He ended up being drafted 3rd overall by the Rangers, and he was unsigned by them. So he went to the University of Washington, where he's had a successful college career. He is a guy who does not look too far off of being able to help at the major league level. You certainly look at his numbers for the AA level, and it seems like he can step right in and be pretty productive there. Would love it if he fell to us at 10th overall. But you can see in the mock draft he's supposed to go 5th to our division rival Angels. So it's very conceivable that, unfortunately, we won't get a second crack at Mr. Patterson after we passed on him 3 years ago. And those who had Patterson going 5th to the Angels actually proved to be wrong as well, as he is the only pitcher off the board in the first 9 picks before our Oakland A's will be up. But Mr. Patterson ended up going number 1 overall to the Tampa Bay Rays. So Cowboy Patterson still not an Oakland A, and with the type of contract he's likely to be meriting if he reaches his full potential when he gets to his free agent years, probably pretty unlikely that Cowboy Patterson will ever be an Oakland A, unfortunately. As I noted, Chris Patterson was the only pitcher off the board in the first 9 picks, so we're going to have free reign on any other pitcher available in this draft. We'll take a look here before we finish up the episode at everyone who is a 4-star or better prospect, including another college player with the same surname as Chris Patterson, but not quite the same upside. Dan Wenning, starting pitcher out of Independence, Missouri. Looks like he could be a decent major league starter, but fragile physically. Not the greatest personality in the world. Probably not a direction we'd go with a high schooler at number 10 overall. Jordan Pullen, 18-year-old. Looks like a pretty respectable pitching prospect. Throws in the mid to high 90s with ground ball tendencies, so a lot to like about him. Don't think we end up going with him, but I certainly like the lefty Pullen a lot more than Dan Wenning. The college guy among the top pitching prospects is Kevin Patterson out of Berkeley. Looks like he could be a solid major league pitcher. He's almost 22 years old, only throws in the low 90s, does have a high work ethic. Doesn't look like he's necessarily going to be a star, but with average stuff, potentially above average movement and really good control, he could certainly be a useful major league starter if everything worked out. Andy Craney, 17-year-old starting pitching prospect, a high schooler, going to need a changeup develop to be a starter. Low adaptability, work ethic, and intelligence, not a profile I think we would take it. 10th overall. Jeff Brewer is a reliever, 2-pitch guy. Looks like he could be pretty useful, but probably not the direction we would go with the number 10 pick either. And before we take a look at the top hitting prospects, everyday players, I will take a look at the top 4 pitching prospects. Juan Moya, 18-year-old out of the Carlos Beltran Baseball Academy. 3 pitches that aren't far off major league quality, well above average stuff, movement, and control if he fully develops. Extreme ground ball tendencies, throws in the mid-90s. Certainly a pretty solid prospect. Don't love the low leadership and low intelligence, but he is a pitcher. Pitchers can be quirky. David Leal out of the International Baseball Academy. Another guy with only a 3-pitch arsenal, but 3 pitches that also are not far off major league quality. I think his stuff could be excellent, and his movement and control could both be above average, although he's got a lot of work to do on getting that control taken care of and improved. Josh Lamons, similar to Leal, another 5-star ceiling guy according to our scout. Going to be reliant on that changeup developing to have a 3-pitch arsenal, but think his stuff, movement, and control could all be above average to well above average if things go well. And the final 5-star potential pitching prospect is Kevin Kevin Ejiofor, that's what I'll call him. High work ethic guy. Oof. Definitely very questionable whether he'll ever have 3 pitches. You could actually say it's questionable whether he's ever going to have anything except a fastball. Stuff could be devastating. Movement and control, both kind of average. Great stamina. 19-year-old who throws in the high 90s. Great at holding runners. A lot of things that he's really good at. But definitely not necessarily in love with any of these pitchers at 10th overall. Doesn't mean we won't end up going with one, but the pitcher that we really loved is off the board because everybody else loved him as well. And other than Chris Patterson, who's obviously already gone, doesn't seem like there's a ton of high-end college prospects in this draft, unfortunately, so we may end up going more with a high school project. Before we finish things up, we'll take a look at these, 7 guys who are 4.5 to 5-star potential among the position players, and then I'll do some additional work offline to make sure that I'm not missing anybody. First baseman Sam Suter looks like an excellent contact hitter, not necessarily particularly good at anything else. Not a lot of speed, not a lot of defense. Does not seem to be the type of guy I would be inclined to go with. Shortstop, Dusty Stevenson, a guy that I like more, high adaptability and work ethic, pretty well-balanced hitting profile. We think he could be above average at everything if he fully develops. Not really a shortstop when all is said and done. Could play left field in a pinch, but probably more of a first base, maybe a third base type, but it does seem like he's got the bat to potentially justify it. Also a switch hitter. Another listed shortstop in Luis Coronado. He's definitely more of a shortstop in terms of his profile. I think he could be an excellent third baseman. Could also play a pretty good second base. Has decent speed and is potentially above average at everything if he fully develops. 19-year-old, so doesn't have any of those 25s and the scary reds as far as his current abilities, but still a long way to go for the Jensen Beach, Florida prospect to be major league ready. But certainly an intriguing candidate as a left-handed hitting middle infielder. There's also a left-handed hitting catcher, Kevin Cleary, available. Like the defense, not much of an arm, potentially outstanding power and a really good eye, high adaptability and work ethic. Question is whether he's going to make enough contact to be able to stay in the lineup. First baseman Chris Brennan, looking for $8 million, so one of the more expensive guys in this class, as you would expect from most of the high school first basemen. If you're playing first base in high school, probably don't bring a ton to the table in terms of speed and defense, but the bat is what you're going to be drafted for, and the Vanderbilt commit certainly looks like he could have potentially borderline exceptional home run power. Center fielder Garrett Baristo, Garrett Baristo, or Baristo, or Baristo. I'm going to just leave that one alone at this point. Pretty interesting hitting profile. Looks like a corner outfielder, competent in terms of the speed, poor competition level that he has faced in Manitoba. But he has hit well over 400 every year of his high school career. Not the most proficient base stealer. And then the 1 5-star everyday prospect is second baseman Shiloh Soles out of Watertown, Massachusetts. Some good personality traits, high loyalty, adaptability, and work ethic, low financial ambition. Like the 60 infield range. He kind of looks like a second baseman, doesn't quite have the arm to be a third baseman. Could also play left field. Could certainly play first base. Really good contact with potentially above average gap power, home run power, and eye if it completely developed. Not necessarily a great base runner. I can't say that I'm in love with any of the options. Doesn't mean that we won't end up falling in love with whoever we end up picking 10th overall. But to me, from a very initial first view of this class, there's not a absolute pound the table guy that I feel incredibly strongly about. So I'll be spending more time offline. But if any of you have opinions on which direction you would go, this certainly seems like a season and a year where I may be more prone to being influenced than I sometimes am. And I have taken a quick look at all of the 4-star everyday player prospects as well. Honestly, not anyone all that inspiring. The most interesting to me, so I'll share his profile with all of you, is the shortstop Nate Bennett, a 17-year-old out of Rhode Island who's committed to San Diego. Definitely has a solid infielder's glove, has slightly above average speed. And if he fully developed with 65 contact and 60 power, he'd be a pretty interesting middle infielder, especially if he does get that gap power in the eye up to major league average. So a lot of work. Is a guy who's not even 18 and a pretty big projection for him to become a major leaguer. But if he reaches his full potential, he's a very interesting player. The issue, of course, is that most of these high school prospects never end up reaching their full potential. And with that, we are going to call it an episode. If you have thoughts on what we should do in the draft, even if you have thoughts on what we should potentially do in the trade market over the next 3 weeks until we get to the trade deadline, would love to hear those in the comments before our next episode. We've had a solid season year to date. As I talked about, we're 2.5 up in the division, but at 48-40, we would just barely be the third wild card right now if we were somehow supplanted in the division standings. So the goal, number 1, is to get this team to a winning record. Goal number 2 is to get this team into the playoffs. And goal number 3 is to win the AL West for the second time in 3 years. And we'll see what kind of progress we can make towards those goals, and also towards hopefully picking up someone who can help us in the not too distant future in the first-year player draft in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.